Welcome to the Agile Career Podcast, where we will take you on the journey from employed for life to employable for life. We'll give you the tips, insights, and strategies to help you build the transferable skills that you'll need. So let's get started. Please welcome your host, Gunther Richter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Agile Career Podcast. As usual, we're going to talk about career changes, and today I wanted to do something slightly different and talk about career balances or balancing careers, if that's even a thing. And I'm thinking specifically around talking about balancing your role in an academic environment, i.e. university, and in working in the corporate world. So today's guest has extensive experience in both the corporate domain and also has a doctorate and is an associate professor at the University of Pretoria. And in this show, we're going to dip a little bit more into how Hanlie did this and how these different domains add value to each other. But without further ado and without stealing away any thunder, I'd like to introduce Hanlie Smuts, who's joining us from Pretoria in South Africa today. Hanlie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Gunther, and thank you so much for the wonderful opportunity to be here. I've been following your podcast, and I'm very excited about this. Thank you so much.
No, that's no problem. And thank you to making the time available. I mean, I know we've been trying for a while to get this in the diary and with obviously commitments on both sides. So, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us on the show. So, no, that's brilliant. All right. I mean, to start off, do you want to just introduce yourself in a bit of detail and perhaps spend a couple of minutes talking about what it is you do at the moment?
Perfect. So after a career, and maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but after a career of more than 30 years in industry, I am now an associate professor at one of the universities in South Africa. Now, the role, it was quite interesting. You know, when you go for this interview for associate professor, I think you sort of romanticize it a little bit, because you're going to teach students, you're going to, in this wonderful learning environment. And then you hit this environment. And if you think about my role now, there's sort of two big components to it. The first is the teaching and learning. So I have a wonderful opportunity to work with postgraduate students, master's students, and then from a supervision perspective, also supervising PhD students. The other component is your own research, and that is part of my KPIs is to produce research outputs. And there is targets for these research outputs. And then obviously the third component is now administration. You have to mark and you have to grade papers. You have to set up exam papers. And that they don't tell you in the interview. But just in terms of the content, I work in the faculty of the EBIT faculty, what we call the EBIT faculty. That is the Engineering, Built Environment and Information Technology faculty. So I'm in the School of Computing, access to wonderful new technologies, new developments from a research perspective. I still have the opportunity to engage with industry, and I love sort of taking this academic view, if you like, and solving industry problems, right? So my research is actually focused on that. I still try, my main focus is to solve business problems now through research. And anyway, maybe one last point. I'm not accountable for operations any longer, right? So I help industry solve these business problems, but I don't have to worry if the systems go down, if the billing is incorrect, or if, there's some issue at the organization. And wonderful position to be in.
Well, you brought up two interesting points there, and I'm glad you talked about operations, because we're going to get onto that a little bit when we talk about some of your roles in the past. And I like the other thing you say. You think about that academic role, and you romanticize about it, but then you talk about still having to do administration. And I guess probably whatever role we're in, there's no getting away from having to do a bit of administration. So
absolutely,
it's an interesting way you describe that. So I guess thinking back then and going back to the start of your career, and funnily enough, perhaps going back to where you started off, I guess, university, right. What was your thought around what you were going to study at university and what you thought your career might look like, what sort of role you might be shaping your studies up for?
Okay, so I guess this is another interesting one because, and anyway, I realize my age when I speak to my students now, especially the undergraduate students now, when I tell them that I've used a mouse, and to navigate for the first time when I've done my honors, right? My honors studies. And I used punch cards. I studied computer science, right? So I studied in a time when computer science wasn't at the top of anyone's list. Not anyone in my school wanted to study it. It was something that women, anyway, was. I was in a girls' school, so no one had this focus in terms of a scientific type role, right? So, we typically go for these assessments. When you like standard 9 or grade 11, your second last year in school, you go for these assessments. Now, I loved mathematics. I went to the university and they did this assessment and they said, so I wanted to go into a human sciences role, right? Something like a medical doctor or a medical profession. So in this assessment, that didn't feature at all. But I guess it picked up on this math, this love for math, and they said, but have you ever thought about computer science? So I was like 17 years old when I first heard about this. What is this all about? So I decided, let me be a pioneer in this, and I'm going to do computer science. So I started off, but let me tell you, I guess it was meant to be, but what a wonderful choice. I loved what we've learned. I loved the content of computer science and of the opportunity to develop software. It just fit my profile like a glove. And that's how I started. It was really not planned at all. It wasn't something that I thought about for a long time. But that's how it started. Studied computer science. I started my career as a developer, a software developer. But what was awesome about my first job at Nasionale Pers in Cape Town was that they allowed you to actually work. You say I had to write, my first system was to write an advertisement booking system. Then instead of sitting in my office and doing requirements analysis and all the things that we know, they actually gave you a spot in the department. So I actually sat in the department where all the advertisement booking was done, where they did all the planning, all of that. So I very quickly in my career had this opportunity to, although I did software development, I also engaged with people. And I realized then that I loved working with people. And especially what I can learn from these people, what I can learn and how I can grow. And perhaps where I have the opportunity, what I can teach people. And that is actually a theme that now, throughout my whole career, almost went full circle now. This engagement with people and this teaching and learning environment. So I'm still learning now, even though I'm at the university, through research, we learn a lot. So I still learn. And obviously now I have the opportunity to formally teach. But that is how my career started. And sort of that was a recurring theme. Because then as a software developer, you become a senior software developer, you become a team leader, and then I became a IT or the project manager of a team, right? You do systems analysis, you manage a team of developers. And again, I realized that we as a team implemented perfect systems. However, the users were not too happy because even though we executed a perfect project, the users didn't necessarily adopt the systems, right? Because it didn't fit in perhaps with their workflow. It didn't really solve their problems that they had, the pain points that they had. So very quickly then I realized, but again, it's about the human factor. And I had the opportunity to be trained on behavioral change management. So as an IT person, that was also not something that I had to do a lot of motivation to be able to do this training. So I was training behavioral change management, and very shortly after that, I left the IT environment and I became a business analyst. And then I could work from the business side back into IT. Now, again, that was an advantage because I could do the IT speak, but I was now more perceived as a business person, right? And a representative of the business. And I could talk between the business and between information technology. But again, this theme of engaging with a human in this human-computer interface.
And I think there's so many times we need to be reminded of the people aspect, regardless of what we're doing, whether it's a technical role, developing software, or any other role. And I mean, you've noted a few things there. You've shared some really good insights. I just want to unpack some of the things you shared. And I suppose going back to that guidance you received before entering university and choosing your direction in a sense, is really good, because so many people that have been on the show have said about the lack of guidance that they received, either through it just wasn't in place. They didn't have any kind of mentorship or guidance in place at school, or they grew up in areas that were impoverished, and it said, well, you can either go and work in the mine, the steel factory, or you go to the army. And those were your choices. So I think
absolutely,
a good call out to some good structures that are in place to provide guidance.
Absolutely.
And then the other thing you said about so working at NUSPERS, which I guess for the sake of our listeners is a publishing company.
Yes.
And they placed you inside the business, which I think was great experience, and
absolutely,
again, a recommendation to anyone, because you get to see how things really work, and you get to observe the people aspect of it like you did, and you're not just kind of removed and you don't understand the context.
Absolutely.
Sitting.
Absolutely. This real world experience, it's real world, right? And for you to really solve that problem, it must be related to that. Absolutely. Totally agree.
And what was your view? So coming from a 4-year university degree and then kind of moving into the working world, what was that transition like? Did you find that difficult at all, or?
Right.
What was that? Was it difficult, or, did you find any gaps?
Yes. What was interesting for me was, I remember the frustration with applying for these jobs, because the organizations asked for experience. And I remember clearly with a NUSPERS interview, I said to them, but how do you expect me to get experience if you don't want to give me the opportunity, right? Okay, luckily that worked out well for me because I got that job. But from an academic perspective to the work environment, I found a theoretical view, because you are taught all these models, and to an extent I'm experiencing that now, right? Because it's an academic degree that we are teaching students, you have to have some basis for assessment, and I have to be able to when you get that paper that says you've earned a master's degree in information technology, there is something associated with that, right? So there's a theoretical base. So when I started to work, the jump to application was something that was new, right? But you had to be able to apply your theoretical knowledge, but in a real world situation. And that they don't really teach you. Now, even now, later on in my career, that was and I don't know whether it's a skill, Gunther. It would be interesting to see to have your thoughts on this as well. But I could manage to apply my theoretical knowledge in a practical situation. And the application is not always consistent because it depends on the scenario. So if you are in a certain environment, you can't just take a recipe, plug it in, and it works, right? You have to understand the context, draw from your theory, from your experience, and then apply. So that initially was something that I had to learn very quickly, because that translation into from theory to what does it mean in practice, obviously you're not taught that. I think what did help was the fact that I was sitting in the environment. I was part of the operations of the operating rhythm of that department, the advertisement booking department. And I think that assisted you so that you had the experience of the real world, and I could then draw from my theory to say, how do I deal with it in this real world experience? So maybe just to illustrate my point, if I stayed in my office and I didn't have that real world experience, my application of my theory may have been different, right? So I strongly believe that even when you develop products now, when I late in my career developed products for Africa, for East and West Africa, for the mass market there, standing in the mass market outside Kampala, I realized we could not sit in South Africa and design a product for that market, right? So this notion of taking this theoretical knowledge that you have, but understand your context, key point for me, I think.
I think that's a fantastic piece of insight. And I like the word you used, or the term you used, about immersing yourself in the environment.
Yes.
Because I think that's exactly where you draw value. And I think that's a really great tip for anyone listening, is to try and get that, you know, whether it's through work placement, yes, or through the start of your formal career, is to try and get that understanding of the business. And I think that goes back to a previous point you made as you were starting to talk, as you were building your career, about developing, yes, on one side those business skills, yes, and on the other side your technology skills. And yes, and I think, you know, having those two and growing those both,
absolutely,
gives you a really strong proposition in terms of what you can offer employers, or you can offer yourself as a, you know, if you're an entrepreneur or whatever, yes, it is, a really valuable set of skills to have in tandem.
Absolutely.
So you talked then about you progressed into the role of a project manager,
yes,
and which I guess is also a kind of natural transition. You find a lot of people starting off in development careers or technical careers and then moving, yes, into project management.
Right.
But I guess what was the kind of biggest learning when you made that move from, you know, I guess from doing to managing? I don't want to say managing is not doing, but it's a different, right, level of detail. You know, what were your big experiences or learnings from making, yes, that move?
Yes. So you just find all the interesting questions. This is something also in my career, Gunther, that I sort of draw a lot on. And when I coach and mentor people now, you know, we often get to this point. So, you know, if you're a software developer, it's quite exact. I mean, a computer program has to work, right? I had a certain standard of, I won't say describe myself as a perfectionist, but there is a way to do certain things. I like to do certain things. You're professional about it. You do quality work, you know, etc. So the first thing when you start to manage a team then is to trust your team, right? So, and you need to trust your team to deliver it as well as you would have done yourself, because you can't do all of this work yourself. And it was something that was difficult for me initially, to let go, to delegate. So this thing of delegation, right? To delegate my team, to delegate to my team, and to feel that they would deliver this project as well as I would have done it myself, right? So how do I get I remember struggling with this, but how do I get this right? I mean, I can't disempower them, because that's not what a team is about. Secondly, there is too much work. You have to trust your team to deliver, else you won't make your deadlines. I realized very quickly that, or what worked for me, let me say, no, not this is how it is done, but what worked for me was, you know what, to spend the time with a member, a team member, to just spend a little bit of time, invest in that team member, and coach them and mentor them, and share your experience with them. And in that, they find their own way. But you know what is really good about that investment is that they start to deliver probably like 80%, like you would have done it, right? They find their own way in it. There's more than one way to solve a problem. But the fact that you've invested that time in them assisted, or it helped with pulling this team together, and that you could really delegate with trust. So often we are too busy, you know. We say, no, we just have to work. You just have to allocate out the work, deliver. You know, these are the deadlines, and you don't invest that time. But let me tell you the value of just investing that time, investing in your team members, guiding them initially, and then they just grow as individuals. And it is aligned growth, if I can call it that, right? Because then the entire team is on that basis and in that space. And that really worked for me. So I had to really learn this thing about delegation and to trust that my team would deliver to as like I would have done it. And you know, when you have a team, later on, we were a big team of business analysts and project managers. It was 110 people in the team. Then you have to do it that way because it is just too many people, right? So that is something that firstly I had to learn, and then secondly, the approach that worked for me in terms of that investment in the resources in your team.
That's a great point. And I mean, in this podcast, we're always trying to draw out those transferable skills that you build and take with you through your career. And it's interesting, delegations, this is the first time it's come up. So I think that's a really good one that I'd like to call out to the listeners, because it's also such a difficult thing to get right. It's, as you say, it's that investment versus payoff trade-off, because you often think it's going to take me half an hour to do it myself. It's going to take me an hour to teach someone else, you know, and it's short-term thinking to say I'm going to do it myself, because it's not sustainable, as you say, managing a team of 110. So it's definitely a skill that I think people can invest in and try and get right. And as you say, that goes alongside trust, because the two need to go together. So that's a great point there. And I guess moving on from project management, you then went on to a career as starting off as a business analyst, not necessarily starting off, but at a new organization, which was the first time I think you joined Mobile Telephone Networks or
telecommunication, correct?
Or MTN as we know it, and in fact where we met many years ago. So you started off there as a business analyst, and what kind of what drew you to the telecom space and moving from that project management role to a business analyst role?
Right. So I guess I'm a very loyal employee, right? So Nasionale Pers, Naspers, my first role, they got the license in South Africa to start up the first pay TV station, which was Mnet at that stage. It's now MultiChoice and DSTV, right? So my boss, my line manager at Naspers, was sent to from Cape Town to Johannesburg to start up MultiChoice. So I sort of moved with that, right? I was like, I think my staff number for the pay TV station was number 67, right? Employee. Yeah. And Gunther, if I quickly may derail here a little bit, but maybe just to give a view of that time, we purchased a film booking system, film management system from the USA, and they arrived from Los Angeles with literally a suitcase full of tapes with this system, right? The full management system. So when I joined, I followed my line manager to Pretoria, moving from Cape Town to Pretoria or Johannesburg, relocating, that was the first thing to make sense of all of these tapes. And I then worked on the full management system. But that was the time when I was the IT project manager, right? I was still in information technology. Now, the reason why this is important is I worked there for 10 years, right? MultiChoice then got a license for telecommunication, for GSM in South Africa. So again, I was seconded to MTN for 6 months to start up, to be part of the startup team that worked on, that started up GSM, mobile telephony in South Africa. After the 6 months secondment, I went back to MultiChoice to pay TV for 6 months, but then I joined MTN permanently, and then I stayed there for 22 years, right? So it was almost like every time the company or the team where I work, the company where I work, have a different business venture, I have the opportunity to go there, and then I have I could learn all of these new things, new skills, new technologies, and work there. And maybe just to make another point here, the world is so full of opportunity, Even now, where I am in academia, use these opportunities, take these opportunities. You made the point about, but ask to work on a project so that I can learn a new skill. Ask to manage the interns in my department, because that is how you learn to delegate, right? So use these opportunities to do it. But that's how I ended up in telecommunication and at MTN specifically, at that time in the role as a business analyst. So it was still a technology environment, so I still fundamentally worked with technology, but I had this wonderful opportunity to work with people. The second point that I want to make here is, often we think about learning as moving up. I need to become a supervisor, a manager, a general manager, an executive. But what I focused on then was to learn as much about the business as I could, right? So as a business analyst, I worked in every department in the company. I worked in customer services in call centers. I remember all the call center projects that I've done. I worked with engineers that worked on the network. I worked in finance. I worked in supply chain, because of the import of mobile phones and to the central warehouse here in Johannesburg, and then the distribution across the country nationally. I worked in supply chain. So I worked in each department in the organization as a business analyst. And let me tell you, even till today, understanding the interrelationships about these departments, the relevance of this cross-domain work, and that you have to work together in all of these areas to deliver your business objectives. Lastly, where we are now with Industry 4 and all of these wonderful digital technologies that people are talking about, digital transformation that people are talking about, it's even more relevant that all of these need to work together to be able to deliver on your business objectives and your business strategy, right? So I never maybe from a junior business analyst to senior business analyst, you were promoted, right? But it wasn't like I moved up all these layers in the organization. It was more horizontal movement, if you like, right? And learning about the business, learning about the interrelationships of business. That really added a lot of value when I became a general manager then, to have this more holistic view of the business, right? And anyway, where if I may use this as an example, where you and I had the opportunity to work together, where you worked on a business case to build an off-ramp off a highway into the MTN premises, right? I mean, where on earth would you get that opportunity to work on such a project if it wasn't for this more holistic view of the business and understanding the interrelationships? So I think value in that, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great point you make. And I think you're talking about the business case for building that off-ramp was an interesting one, because as you say, where else, unless you were in civil engineering, would you get to do that? And we were working in the telco space. So, so that's really good. And I think getting that breadth of experience and being able to, I guess, kind of dip into all of those functional areas of the business is great. And I think as a consultant, I've always been a consultant, so I do get that variety and working those. But I think for many other people that are in a I guess a single corporate career, taking that approach, you can do the same. You can build up your knowledge of how the business works. You don't have to sit in sales and only know about sales, or sit in HR and only know about HR. So I think that's a really fantastic bit of advice. And again, those are the skills then that you can lift and shift, because those skills that you learned there, you can use them in any industry. There'd be nuances and those sorts of things, of course. So that's really good. And then the other thing I wanted to draw on was opportunities you mentioned. And we've spoken about this in episodes before. And in fact, one of the previous guests was working in an organization early on in his career, and they said, we need some people to help us implement a new point of sale system. And he put his hand up and said, I want to get involved. And that shaped up his whole career. It gave him all of the opportunities from that point on. And as you say, it's really important to, put your hand up and volunteer, get stuck into those things, look out for those opportunities and take them when they're available to you. So that's a really great piece of advice.
May I just like one other point there, Gunther? You've now triggered another thought. So I've always tend to do that. Sometimes my husband would say, just sit on your hands, don't offer, because, I ended up being the chairperson of the school governing body for 10 years, facilitating for church groups, strategic planning, because obviously they can't invest huge amounts of money in, or not invest at all, in consultants, etc. So I remember my husband said, please just sit on your hand, don't put up your hand. But let me tell you, I had wonderful opportunities because of the skills of project management, together with understanding the business. When I want to second someone to manage an organization-wide project, I had so many opportunities to manage, to be involved there. For example, when they restructured the entire business, they moved from a functional organization to a business unit organization. I had the opportunity to manage that project, right? So just your point about, they're asking, we're looking for someone to manage this project or to take care, like your example of the point of sale system. I think that's wonderful opportunities then to use all of your skills and bring all of this together in managing such an enterprise-wide project. Great opportunities in there and learning in there.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree. And I guess then still, and you said before as well, you were at MTN for a number of years, and
Yes.
You started off that role as a BA and immersed yourself in different areas of the business. But I guess you then moved on to kind of more of an organizational development role at MTN.
Correct.
And
so,
all I was going to
yes.
say was, what was your thinking in terms of making that move and your experiences
Right.
in that move?
So again, it was a link from the management of an enterprise-wide project. I worked, because it was an organizational redesign project. I had sort of experience now in project management. So I did the Prince 2 Foundation accreditation. Eventually, just to formalize my project management skills, I had a good understanding of the business. My human interface. I had a really good network, and this is something, Gunther, that I can talk about for hours. Is this network, right? My business network now, my academic network through researchers. We're busy with a project in BRICS, so this concept of network. I had a good network in the organization, good understanding of the business, but now for the first time, because it was an organizational restructuring, I realized the impact and the uncertainty that organizational restructuring has on people, over and above the law around it, right? The legislation around dealing with restructuring. So this was now a new thing for me. Now, I quickly want to just interrupt myself and just tell you what I've done. So now when I started to learn about all of these areas of the business, right, I realized, but you know what? I actually want to be the boss. I want to be like the CEO. And I'm going to work to get to that point one day. So I did what I called my bubble chart, right? I looked at the profile of a CEO, the job profile of a CEO, and I created things that I need to know to be a good CEO, right? I created, and it was bubbles, and this is why I call this my bubble chart. So some of these bubbles I could fill already, and some I could sort of half full, and some I still had to work on. Now, during this project, and understanding this, or realizing that there's this bigger issue about actually the human with a family, with security of a job, that went through this restructuring. Okay, this was a bubble that I had to fill. It was something that I needed to do. And after this project, I had the opportunity to actually take a job in human resources, in the HR department. There was an opportunity to become an OD specialist, an organizational design and development specialist. And I decided, I'm an IT person. I've studied computer science. I'm going to take this job, this OD job. And I actually formally had a job in HR as an OD specialist. But you know what? What a wonderful opportunity. I could understand, work with this human side a lot more. So I was trained now in job design, in job development, in organizational design. What are the principles of organizational design? Of competency profiles, of mapping people to jobs, because remember, when you restructure, that is what you have to do. So I was now formally trained on these aspects, but I could also work with data. And you know what? Even till today, I mean, in research, we work with data. I love working with data. But now, as an OD specialist, you do culture audits, right? It's an assessment in the enterprise, but what we called culture audit. I'm not too sure what organizations would call it nowadays, probably still some kind of a culture audit, but I could now work with data. So how did data inform the decisions you could take about your employees? Where are the hotspots? Where are the pain points? Where do you have to focus to ensure employee motivation? Values of the organization. I mean, this was a whole wonderful new world that was opening up for me, using some of my core skills: data analysis, my network, engaging with people, you know, a lot from what I've learned in business analysis. And what was very valuable here was, you know, when I sat with an engineer, when I sat with a finance person, when I sat with a call center person, to understand their context. So drawing a lot on the skills that you and I have been talking about now, drawing a lot on the skills and really making that connection with that person. So this part, I eventually worked in HR for 4 years. My final job there was the senior manager for learning and organizational development. What a wonderful world that opened up for me. And let me tell you, I could fill up one of my bubbles, right? My CEO bubbles, right? From what I've learned from that role. Now, in there, it was the first time where I was accountable for learning and development, where I looked at training in the organization. And it was just almost closing a small loop that I had this opportunity to teach people again, not me personally, in some instance, me personally, but that I had a team of trainers that had to deliver training, face-to-face training, blended learning. I learned about all of these things. But teaching people, right? And this theme is now almost again where I am now. So it was a theme that sort of came back into my career, and that I had the opportunity to head up the learning and organizational development. The other aspect there was bursaries. We had MTN had bursaries, 10 or 20 or so bursaries. So I could engage with learning institutions where our students were working at that time. So a wonderful period of 4 years where I worked in human resources as an IT person.
Yeah, which I think is, I mean, that's quite a jump. You know, it's as we talked about earlier in your career, it's a natural progression to perhaps move from
Yes.
being a software developer to a BA to a project manager. But I think taking a leap from those sort of hard skills to kind of more soft, I'm not saying entirely
Yes.
soft skills, because there's still a lot of functional skills around working in HR. But certainly it's not something that you could easily lift and shift, I think, someone out of the software development world
Yes.
and put them into that world. So
Absolutely.
that's a great point. And I like the way you've described your bubble chart, because on a few episodes we've spoken about doing a skills assessment. So understanding, you know, in terms of understanding what the skills are you need to develop, in this case specifically transferable skills. But the first step is understanding where you are.
Yes.
And I suppose that's the thing with any planning task, and then seeing, okay, where do I want to be? What are those skills I need? So there's a great recommendation. Draw up a bubble chart and see how you fill those bubbles and stack up and build your learning plan based on that. And it can be a learning plan. And the learning is probably learning in the academic sense, but also in the application.
Absolutely.
So as you say,
Absolutely.
I need the skills. I'm landing this role in HR, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to build those skills.
Absolutely. So a lot of it was formal training, absolutely. Formal training, teaching and learning, certification, but experience as well. So on the job training, learning from senior consultants. So on the job learning. It was a mix of this to fill up my bubble chart. Absolutely.
So then how far did you get with filling up that bubble chart?
So at that point, I progressed. I could, you know, around the change management aspect, leadership, the people side of it, quite a bit. At that time, the big hype was on customer experience. I don't know, as a consultant, you would have dealt with this. There was a big, when organizations appointed chief experience officers, and customer experience was a big thing. CRM systems, it was a big thing. It was a big hype, because now instead of, so we spoke about this human and this network, right? And this human computer interface, where it started for me as an individual, but at an organizational aspect, it now extended to customers. Happy employees, happy customers, because if a call center person answer the phone and they answer it, as a motivated employee, the customer would realize that. So this was the time where there was this big hype around customer experience. And I then had another opportunity to move to sort of another bubble component. And this was external customers, right? Because so far in our talk, my focus was more on internally, right? And the employees and developing myself and learning. But now it was this notion of customer. And remember, for my CEO bubble chart, the customer engagement is a big bubble, right? And even today, I think more so, just because the customer is the consumer is quite powerful. The expectations are very high. The expectation is that you as an organization will know me as an individual, not as part of a segment, but me as an individual, what my profile is. So this thing about external customer was now really the first time that it really was now something that dawned on me. But you know what? I need to understand this. So at that time, I had the opportunity for the role to be the general manager of customer integration and development. So it was it was a department that focused internally, but on process optimization, if you like, to optimize the engagement with external customers. So part of our measures, part of our KPIs was also to measure a customer, the customer experience, right? So apart from now becoming a general manager, so for me it was a promotion. It was a higher, in terms of grade, it was a higher grade role as a general manager. I had a direct measure on external customer. So in that role, I learned a lot about that engagement and that touch point, and not just from a touch point, from a technology touch point perspective, but from a multi-channel touch point, right? Because through customer experience now, customers engage with you through web, through mobile, through online store, through product, the product that they use. So multiple touch points, call center, some of it human, some of it technology. Awesome experience and a lot of learning in terms of my role and my team's role in enabling that interface. So that was sort of my next step, was now this external customer learning.
And I think, that's it's a big jump in the sense of, talking about internal customers and now
yes,
focusing on external customers. And we're talking millions of customers, yes. So traditionally where segmentation makes sense and, cohorts make sense. And it's an idea to understand your customers. But as you say, everybody wants that level of individualization. And it was at the time, I think, where consumers were becoming a lot more empowered. There was a lot more choice. It was easy.
Absolutely.
The barrier to changing service providers is very low. Specifically, I guess there was mobile number portability coming up and all of those sorts of things. But I think even outside of the telco space, again, I look at the banking space in the UK, the barriers to change are so low. With new standards like open banking, where you just press the button and it's done for you. All your debit orders are shifted, everything. It's, and organizations really do need to pay attention, and I think that deliver that level of customer experience. So it was interesting when you say it was kind of hype, and it maybe was hype in those days, but now it's become business as usual, or it's de facto. You need to do that stuff as standard. So so really great examples there. Probably more advice for organizations to pay attention. But again, some important skills for individuals to develop in terms of thinking about who your customers are, and everyone's customer, whether they are internal stakeholders or the person on the street. So that's a good bit of advice. And you drew on some other bits there, and I guess you're surfacing these transferable skills as we go, and that's just great because they're just kind of popping out. You talked about networking, the importance of building your network, and in your case you got the business and academic one, and then data analysis. So this is the second time it's come up in a number of conversations, and even if you're not a data person, the ability to analyze data is one of those valuable skills that everyone should develop. So I'm really glad you drew that out as well. That's a really good point. So
absolutely.
At MTN, then you spent about 20 years. You said it was quite a long stint, but I guess I'm guessing the answer is going to be there was an opportunity where you moved on to the JV, a joint venture. Correct. It was an opportunity to move on to that.
Correct.
I know you've spoken about it before, a bit offline. Yes. But I'll leave it to you to tell the story.
Right. So I guess in terms of the period, again, now people think, how can you work for one organization for 22 years? But if you look at my CV, every 2 years, there was another opportunity, right? And because I was in this mindset of filling my bubble charts and I wanted to learn more, I took these opportunities, right? Because the next opportunity was now digital. Everyone went digital. And you had to have digital touch points and digital interfaces. So this was sort of driving the next focus, and that was enabling the next opportunity. And you've mentioned it now, this was very exciting. This was a very exciting project, a wonderful, wonderful experience. But why was this attractive for me? Look, it wasn't that I could choose to go there, right? I was seconded to go to this project. So let me quickly tell you why. MTN Telecommunication made a joint venture, or decided to negotiate it with insurance partners in South Africa to create a joint venture to design a telco insurance product. And this is not to insure your phone or to insure your technology, right? This was about providing death and medical insurance, but through a digital interface, right? Not a traditional broker that would go and visit people. The second thing that was interesting about this was that it was for the mass market. Often we associate insurance with high-value customers, right? People that can afford huge premiums. The aim of this was to make a difference in Africa. So apart from all of the other things, when I had the opportunity, when I was seconded, that is something that spoke to the heart, right? Because this thing of making a difference with the work that you do was something that really spoke to me. It was a heart thing rather than a head thing, right? So the other thing that was unique about this joint venture was that it was aimed at the mass market. It was aimed at people that live on less than $2 a day, right? So the opportunity was that the joint venture was negotiated. They now needed a secondment or a person from MTN, from the telecommunication company, and a person from the insurance company to start up this joint venture. So I had the opportunity to be seconded to be the MTN person. But what was wonderful about this? We started from scratch. It wasn't a transformation, right? It wasn't that I had an existing organization and I had to be able to do this. We had to start up from scratch. White sheet, blank sheet. The contract was negotiated to say these are what the partners will bring, what insurance will bring, what telecommunication will bring. This is the new IP that we will design. No product. There was no products. Nothing. We started from scratch. 2 people, one from telecommunication and one from insurance. And what a wonderful experience. And it's not like I knew everything. I didn't walk in and said, I know everything, right? We had to draw on the skills, draw on the knowledge of the 2 partners. We had to draw on the infrastructure of the 2 partners, because as a startup, you do not appoint governance roles, right? A company secretary, right? No, the first people that you would appoint would be your product people, because you need to get the product out. Your IT people, we use the infrastructure from our partners. So wonderful. I mean, I can talk about this for a long time, but what a wonderful opportunity to start this, right? Secondly, the aim was the mass market in Africa. So we would work with the partner organizations where MTN had licenses in Africa, as well as the insurance company had presence in Africa. So that is where we started. Again, it would make sense. Don't go into a new country where you don't have a presence, right? So we drew on the trust of the existing brands to be able to launch this product. I had the opportunity to travel and to work in Africa, and what a wonderful experience. And the one word, Gunther, that absolutely comes out is resilience. I had the opportunity we worked in the big cities, in Accra, in Kampala, in Lusaka, in East Africa. I was in Lagos, in Côte d'Ivoire, in Abidjan. But I went out into the market with the salespeople to see our customer, to see who is the end customer. And, we dealt with traders, someone that would sell something, food or goods, to earn a little bit, to look after his family or her family that evening, and tomorrow to start again. So if something happened to that person, and because it was telco insurance, if something happened to that person, how would they still look after their family? And that is where this insurance product added the value and made the difference in Africa. But standing there in that market and seeing that end customer, and this notion of resilience, not just for the business, for me as a worker in the business, to be a resilient citizen, a resilient employee, right? But the resilience of that market, to make a living. So this theme of resilience is something that really came out very strongly in that 4-year period that I worked in this joint venture. But what a wonderful opportunity to design the organization from scratch, to design the job profiles, to appoint the people, to design the blueprint of implementing and rolling out your project in these countries. Wonderful, wonderful opportunity. But again, this theme of resilience, very strong in this time.
Yeah, I think that's important. And that's a very important skill, I think, for people to develop, because we are going to have to deal with setbacks in our life. As you say, you use the example, the target customer was people living on less than $2 a day. You speak to people in Europe about that, and it's unbelievable. That's less than a cup of coffee costs in a shop. And, but even as spoiled as we are living in a Western, first world society, we will at some time in our career have to deal with a setback, and having I think that skill of resilience is key. And so no, that's brilliant that you brought that out. The other thing I think is the opportunity to work overseas. If anyone is presented with that absolutely, that's something you should do. I mean, I did the same, spending almost a year in Lagos, which again, just, broadened my mind. And again, it's just something you can't write down on paper. The experiences are so wonderful. So to listeners, if you have an opportunity, I'd say, grab it. So those are some really key things that you drew out there. The other thing I wanted to, and this has kind of been the theme, you talk a lot about being seconded onto various things. And, for my takeaway from that is it wasn't like your name was put into a hat and pulled out. I think for me, you built that profile. You built your profile up in the organizations you worked with. And I think when the question was asked, who can we get to run this thing? The obvious choice was you. So again, some really great advice to listeners is to build their profiles, put your hand up, volunteer, do quality work, as you said earlier, and really build your profile up in the organizations you work for. And eventually those opportunities will come to you.
Absolutely. That is such a good point, Gunther, because when I coach and mentor people now, that is something that we often talk about, is like personal brand, right? And it's not, it's quite a subtle thing in a way. It is that you want to be a top of mind, right? So when the executives or whoever's going to take the decision sit there and they think, who will be a good person to be this? You must be at what I call top of mind, right? So it is about building that profile, but it's a subtle thing. It's difficult to put your finger on it and to say specific things that you do. But it is about skill set. Obviously, they must have trust that you have the skills to do it. That you see things through, because these projects, you don't just get allocated. I mean, you have to see things through. So maybe again, back to that resilience team. So also as an individual, you need to see things through. You start on a journey and you see it through. But that top of mind, which is around your personal brand. And I believe very strongly in building your personal brand as part of your career.
Yeah, and it's a good point, and it's a balance. It's difficult or subtle, I think, as you say, because it's not like you run around with a big banner saying, "Hey, look at me."
Yes.
Yes. I think it's a balance of being able to, I think, share your achievements, but in a way that you maintain a level of humility, yes. I guess, and that's
correct.
There's probably better ways of describing it, but I think it's exactly that. So, and I guess the other thing then, thinking about, as you've described your career, it's been very jam-packed. You've done loads of things, but at the same time, you were still earning your master's and your PhD.
Correct.
And of course, family life as well. What would you say to people who say, "Well, I don't have time to do something"?
Right. Right. I always wanted to do my master's, but I was very busy filling up my bubble chart, right? And eventually, I think it was like 30 years later or 25 years later, when I finally applied for my master's, I just decided I have to do it now, right? When you think, no, my children must be bigger, or they must be, I must be in this role, you'll take a very long time to do it. So I guess you get to a point where you just have to now decide this is it. I must also just quickly say, Gunther, during my career, remember we spoke about this issue of translating theory into what does it mean for practice, especially at the general management level. I often had to do frameworks. When you brief a team to do a job, you have to frame it, right? When you have to sell something to executives, you have to frame it. Maybe also this thing about interpreting data. How do you concisely put together that one image, that one slide that will sell your idea, that would sell your project, that would get that capital budget for you to do a project, right? So I was known to be the framework person. The CFO at one stage in a telecommunication company said, when I want to design a framework, I ask Hanlie. So I sort of continued to do this because I could draw the picture of what we wanted to achieve, the big picture, right? Now, I guess that is sort of one leg into the academic side. So when I applied for my master's, I had to get special approval because the university was saying, I applied to 6 universities, right? And I had to go for interviews because they said, it's 25 years. Are you sure you want to do this? Will you be able to manage this, etc.? Anyway, I was accepted, and again, all that I wanted was the opportunity. So I started, and then I did my master's. And then I did my PhD immediately after that. I then didn't stop, right? I continued. Now, in order to achieve this, I still had my executive or my general manager role, my general management role. At the joint venture, I had an executive role, but by that time I had my PhD, but I had a significant accountability in terms of the organization. My family, hugely important to me. For my whole life, I have 2 children. My son is now 30. He's a design engineer. He's busy with his PhD. My daughter is 26. She's busy with her honors. On her way to master's next year. She's enrolled already. My husband holds 3 master's degrees now. We are now convincing him to now, do his PhD. But it's important in our family, not just the family as a family, but we always focused on eating together, for example, right? don't sit in and eat in front of the TV. So throughout the years, I always balanced my family with my work. I've now been married for 35 years. It was always important to me. Your family enables you to do all of these things, right? They support you. They cheer you on. So even when I studied, we had a family, we have these family meetings, right? We had a family meeting and I said, look guys, I have this job that is taking me sometimes away from home for significant periods of time, but I really want to do this. So I got my family's buy-in into these studies, right? Once I started, I followed big project manager came out, right? I had a very strict schedule. I tried to work every day. So some students now work in these spurts. They don't do anything for 3 weeks and then they book out 1 week of study leave and then they just work day and night. I didn't work like that. I worked a little bit every day. So I had a very fixed routine. Worked at the office till 6 o'clock in the evening. Spent time with the family. We had our dinner together. I did some office work till about 11. From 11 to 12:30, I did academic study. And then the next morning at 5, I would get up again to go to the office. So I followed a very strict routine in terms of balancing family. And when we had family time, that is what you did. I wasn't on the phone to the office or busy reading a journal paper, right? My family time was my family time. My study time was my study time. Also, I traveled a lot. So on planes, I always had this principle. On the plane, I would do academic work. When I sit at the airport and wait for flights, I would do academic work. When I arrive in the country, I would do my industry work, right? So I just had a very compartmentalized approach, if you like, focus, absolute focus. So having said that, I finished my master's degree in 2 years and I was blessed to receive a distinction for that. I finished my PhD in 2.5 years. It was hard work, I can tell you. Do not think it was really hard work. But I could finish my studies, my academic study, while balancing my job, while still having my family, right? But I managed to achieve that. And for me, it was great because at heart, I love it when I learn new things. So it was an awesome experience to formalize. It's such a formal and disciplined process, the academic study, right? I could formalize that. Another thing that was awesome was that I had the opportunity to what I developed in my academic studies, I could implement it in my role. So my research focus was on knowledge management. I focused on outsourcing, IT outsourcing. Now, at that time, our company outsourced to an external provider, and it was a total outsource. All the people went as well. And I realized the impact of outsourcing on the knowledge in a company. We've lost so much IP because the people left. They could not sort of fit in with the outsource provider's culture, and they eventually left. So as an organization, we lost that knowledge. Secondly, in such a relationship, you generate new knowledge together with your outsource partner. And as an organization, if you don't protect that, it leaves with your outsource partner, right? So my studies was around this notion of knowledge, and especially in the context of outsourcing. And what a wonderful opportunity to be able to implement and make it practical, the things that I've developed through my studies. So a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to achieve, to get the academic degree, but also to be able to make it practical in the real world.
Absolutely, and that's what I was going to say, because looking now at your role back at the university as an associate professor, it's almost like I was going to say the circle completes, but I don't think it's a circle. I think it's these two threads that are interwoven all the way along, and I think that at the start of the show, or just prior to the start, we talked about the theme for the show, and I think that has clearly emerged in terms of the way you've described your experience, how you built skills, how you took new knowledge on board. And those two, I think, threads run really nicely together in terms of the crossover between the two. So that's been really fantastic. And I guess moving back into the university now, I mean, what's your single biggest, I guess, learning, having moved from that corporate
Yes.
world into academia?
Yes, yes. Gunther, now I have to make another confession. So, I was happily filling up my bubble chart, right? And then I got to a point where I realized, you know what? For me to take that next step, is going to have too much of an impact on my family. So sometime in my career, I decided, you know what? I'm very happy where I am now with what I've learned, with how many bubbles I filled up in my bubble chart. But at that time, I looked at the role of an academic, of a professor, because I guess at the back of my mind, this thing about teaching and learning, so I would learn my entire life, but I loved sharing what I've learned with people, right? So it would make sense that I look at an opportunity but is there an opportunity to share this back, to share back what I've learned? Why would I just keep it to myself, right? And if anyone can learn anything from what I've learned, I mean, how wonderful is that? So I did look at the role of a lecturer, but it was like far into the future. So what I've done, after I received my PhD, I served on advisory boards of universities. So, universities have an advisory board of industry people where, and it's not like you meet twice a year, where they present their degrees, they ask industry, is there skills that you think is missing? What can we do to produce better graduates into your organizations? So I served on the advisory board of quite a few universities, 3 or 4 universities, including the University of Pretoria. What a wonderful engagement at these meetings, because now I had direct access to all the professors of the particular department. We were a panel of about 20 industry people. So again, your network and what you learn from other industries was great. So the one thing in my this issue of, but maybe someday, when I'm big, I can be a lecturer, right? A wonderful engagement. But advisory board was one thing that I've done. The other thing is, because I had a PhD, I could supervise students, right? So I could supervise students to do their master's dissertations. And I contacted business schools here. Some of the private institutions and the universities, and said, look, I'm available as a supervisor. So I ended up supervising MBA students for probably 6 or 7 students in an 18-month cycle, right? So I still retained my contact with the academia, but I now started to look at research studies, what constitute a good study, what's a good topic. And all of these MBA students solved business problems through their research. I mean, that was part of their brief, right? They chose a topic, a problem in their area, and they solved that. So I started to supervise students. The third thing in this engagement that I realized is what counts, what is important for an academic career is your standing as a researcher. And how do people judge that? They judge that through your publications, right? So because I had my master's studies and had my PhD, I had a source to write journal papers from and articles from. So I love writing, Gunther. I love that process of writing an article, right? So I used the data that I've collected during my studies, and I started to write papers and publish papers with my supervisors. So by the time that I applied for the role at the university, I had, I think, 12 publications, right? Academic publications, right? And when the opportunity came up through my advisory board contact to apply for this role, they said, oh, but we've got this role, maybe you are interested. And I've done a guest lecture for them already. So people then start to invite you to do guest lectures, right? I took the chance and I applied for this job. And I thought, you know what? I'm not going to worry about this. I'm going to go for it. It's an opportunity, try it. If I don't get it, I'm going to learn from this experience. If I get it, then it will be a big decision, because the jump from the monetary, the issue with salary from a private or from a industry role to academic is significant, right? But then I'll cross that bridge when I get there. So it took a while, and I was invited for an interview. So it was, oh my word, I've been invited for an interview. So now all of a sudden I had to prepare for this interview, because I mean, for industry, I can draw from experience. But what if they ask me, how would you manage conflict in a classroom? What would I answer? Right? So I went through this process of, oh my word, what can academics ask me in this interview? It was actually quite funny. I actually laughed at myself, because here I am, this executive, right? And now you worry about this interview. But anyway, so I prepared as well as I could, and it was quite daunting. I mean, when you walk in, it's a long table. The dean is on the end of the other table. You are in the hot seat on this side of the table. There are all these professors from the whole faculty, probably about 10 people, 12 people in total, right, in this interview. There's a student council representative, there's an HR, obviously human resources is present, and then just all these professors, they introduce you to all these professors. Anyway, I went for this interview and I just enjoyed it. I said to myself, I'm just going to enjoy it and love what I do, right? So they asked me some questions. So, Dr. Smuts, what will you be able to teach? And it's like, oh my word, I don't know. I mean, you figure it out. When I get my subject, I research it, I'll figure it out. But anyway, so I managed to get through this interview. And then a while later, I received an offer. So I was totally stunned. I mean, it was, I guess, I didn't expect anything, right? But anyway, I had the opportunity. I received an offer to go to university. So I thought for the whole 10 days, I had 10 days to think about this, because I really loved my career. I love my job. I love what I do. And here I have this wonderful opportunity to actually become a lecturer. And the other thing is, they offered me an associate professor position. So I think if it was a senior lecturer, it would have been a more difficult decision, right? Just because of job grade, but also I guess about, but where you are in your career. So I will now be called professor. Anyway, I thought for the whole 10 days, like 1 minute before 12 that evening, discussed with my family, looked at all the options, and I decided I'm going to take this opportunity. And I had to work 3 months notice. I had to work a quarter of a year's notice in my existing role, but I decided to take this opportunity, and now I've been there for almost 2 years, right? And the big difference, it almost felt like I just went on to doing what I'm doing, but I don't have an accountability to the operational accountability, as I've mentioned earlier, right? To make sure that the systems are up, that all the employees are happy, that they are all motivated. Now I had to make sure that the students are happy, that the students are motivated. I mean, you have parents now, as part of your external customers. All the things that we've spoken about, Gunther, I experience now. It was just a different type of customer, right? And I mean, now you deal with their children if it's undergraduates, right? So it's sometimes quite hectic. If I think the parent that I am, right? So it was almost, I could transfer very easily into this environment. 2 things was very, very different for me. It was this notion of, it was almost like people don't work together in a team. We are a department, but each lecturer has their own research area. And you work on your research focus, right? So there's ICT for D, there's agriculture, there is governance, there is e-government, there's skills, digital literacy. So each researcher have a very specific focus area. So I focus on knowledge management, digital transformation, the impact of that on knowledge, right? So it was almost like we were in a department, but each one was doing was doing their own thing. And in the industry, we worked so hard to do away with silos, to
Build teams, absolutely.
yeah. So for me, that was something that stood out. And the second thing was theoretical. So some obviously at university, some colleagues have never worked in industry, right? I'm not a career academic, so I've only been there for 2 years. So the one thing was this balance between theory and practical. And I decided then that as a lecturer now, I'm going to try to find this balance. I have to deliver an academic core because that is why you do an MIT degree. But it must be applicable. So my research is practitioner research or practical research, not theoretical research, right? But those were the two main differences for me when I arrived here. As part of our role, we are allowed to consult and work in industry. We've got a business unit at the university called Enterprises at UP, and through them we are allowed to consult. And you can imagine when they tender for contracts that they can draw on the skills in the university. I mean, you have the full set of skills there, right? And some of the skills are the best in the country, the best in the world, that they can draw on to consult. So I still consult to organizations, which is a wonderful opportunity. So my focus now is to not lose what I've learned in industry, to stay in touch with the real world, but to combine that with the theoretical and the practical side in terms of an academic institution.
And I think that's really great. It's kind of, well, throughout the chat we've been having, it's highlighted that you don't have to have one without the other. And I think you've certainly
Absolutely
demonstrated that. And even now landing in that academic environment, you still incorporate other aspects of what it is you enjoy. So I mean, that's really fantastic. And, you've taken, well, certainly me, and I'm sure the listeners as well, on a really awesome journey. And you've dropped so many insightful things in the conversation. So it's been really awesome. I'm really grateful for that. I guess
awesome.
Just before we end off, a couple of short questions to the listeners. Is there any book that you'd recommend, that stood out for you, or one that you're reading at the moment that you could recommend?
Oh my word! To ask that to an academic, Gunther, is not a short. It's not a quick question. I must be honest. To be quite honest, there is nothing that comes to mind right at this point. I'll tell you why. Because of the research, we read a lot, right? You have to read a lot. So I tend to read academic reading, academic papers, and academic. I cannot even tell you when last did I read a book. Even for fun book, right? So there's no ways that I can even answer that quick question now.
It's like asking you to choose your favorite children.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No. Okay, that's a good analogy, I think. Okay, and finally, if listeners want to connect with you, how can they do that, or where can they learn more about you?
That would be so awesome to engage with more people. I do have a website where there is a bit of a profile, www.hanliesmuts.com, where you can see a little bit of my career, some of my thinking, some of my publications. You're more than welcome to contact me through the social media platforms. I am on LinkedIn and Twitter. And Facebook and Instagram. I haven't tried with some of the new platforms yet. I guess it shows the age, right? But more than welcome to contact me through one of the social media platforms. I really like to share. If I can share anything, I don't mind sharing. Emailing information, emailing links to reading. Absolutely. So any engagement would be wonderful in that regard. Absolutely.
Okay, that's awesome. Thanks so much for that. And I mean, you've shared so much on the show already. So that's really great. What I'll do is I'll put these links in the speaker notes, the show notes, sorry, that'll write up for the episode, and users can just follow those links and hopefully get in touch with you. And but
awesome.
Hanlie, thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for all you shared, your time and all the insights in the show today. I've had a really awesome chat.
And thank you to you, Gunther, and thank you for the wonderful, wonderful chat and opportunity, and wishing you all of the best.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Hanlie. Well, thank you again to Hanlie for joining us on the podcast. I think that was another great story. It's so interesting hearing different people's experiences and the way they've experienced the start of their career and how they've grown their career. And I think, often there's a discussion, or I guess a bit of a challenge around whether you should go the academic route, if at all, or whether you should go, straight into work, straight into the commercial environment. And I think what Hanlie has demonstrated really well is that it's possible to do both. I think at times it did seem like she had a lot on her plate. As I say, holding down a full-time job in the corporate environment. There were senior roles as well. Having a family and also completing postgraduate studies. So I think, just demonstration that it's entirely possible to have both, and you just need to be focused and plan and, put the effort in. So as usual, I will provide the summary notes in the show notes and the highlights, but I wanted to touch on a few things, as I always do at the end of the show, and really just draw those out. And I think, the first part of the show really focused around, I think, apart from technology, was thinking about the people component, the human factor, engaging with people. And I think this will be true of many people that have grown up or started their careers or worked in a technology environment. It's often easy to forget the human factor and forget that we're writing software or creating products for humans, in fact. So I think it's really good to draw that out and, in addition to that, build those personal or personal skills, those softer skills, those skills that can help you get on with people, understand people, understand their emotions, and think about the human factor in all that you do. The other important thing I think or the other thing that was important to me was Hanlie talking about immersing herself in the environment, and what a better way to learn than to be at the coalface and seeing what people do every day, so that you can understand what they do and the challenges they face and how they do their jobs. Some other good pointers around, the importance of doing quality work and being professional. Hanlie spoke about delegation as well. I think something that many people struggle with, especially as you grow in seniority and you take more and more on yourself, and thinking about what it is you need to kind of offload or delegate, and the sorts of skills you need to develop around delegation. It's a lot more than just saying to somebody, can you please do this for me? It's around, training them, making sure they're skilled to do it, but at the same time, trusting them to do what you would, be willing to do yourself, and know that you would do well yourself. Another big shout out to opportunities. Again, Hanlie spoke a lot about opportunities, and, she talked about, being seconded onto a number of projects and the joint venture and that sort of thing. And I think it's so much more than just opportunities. As I said, it's making opportunities for yourself. You build that brand, you do a good job, and your name comes up naturally when these positions are being considered. So it's a lot more than just drawing your name out of a hat and saying, okay, well, you're on the secondment, or we've got this opportunity for you. It's really about creating that opportunity yourself. Hanlie also spoke about cross-domain work, so working right across the business, that experience that she used to fill up her bubble chart, as she called it, and to the extremes of kind of moving into HR, from a more technical or delivery environment to build up those skills where she saw there was a gap. So really great approach. Hanlie spoke about networking, the importance of networking. In her case, both a business and academic network, and we might have more than one network ourselves. Your personal network, your business network. You might have a community-based network, but really the importance of building that network, and that goes hand in hand with the human and people skills that I spoke about at the start of the summary. Hanlie also mentioned the importance of data analysis. Again, this has come up on a number of podcasts. And even if you aren't a data person, or your role doesn't involve having to work with data, although it probably does to some degree, it might not involve data analysis. It's really an important skill to develop. We spoke about this with Jamie Mackay around being able to not necessarily crunch the numbers, but do the research, find the information, make sense of it. So, it is still data related. It might not be hard numbers, but those are absolutely fantastic transferable skills to build. Resilience was another one that Hanlie brought up. We've touched on that in a number of episodes before. Personal brand, just kind of touched on that when I talked about the secondment and taking hold of those opportunities. And also the importance of frameworks, as Hanlie mentioned. A framework is really something that you can kind of hang something on. It's a start, it's a blueprint, it's something to get you moving when you're trying to solve a problem, address a certain issue, or utilize an opportunity. And then finally, some of the advice that Hanlie provided was around, taking on all of the stuff that she did, what worked for her, might not work for everyone else, but certainly there were some key points there around finding your work cadence, so understanding what works for you and balancing that in with your other commitments, segmenting your time, so don't butterfly, and I think this is true, this should be true of everyone, is multitasking or butterflying between tasks is really counterproductive. So be strict in how you segment your time and stick to those rules. That's the important thing, and it's easy to say because it's difficult to break those rules, but really sticking to those rules. So once again, thank you to Hanlie for sharing her story and so much insight with us. I really appreciate it. And also to you, the listeners, this has been a doozy of a show. There's been so much insight. So really, thanks again for your time. Thanks for your commitment to the podcast and listening. Please do subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. And please do leave a review, get in touch, have a chat with me. I'd love to hear from you. And I look forward to talking to you again in the next episode. In the meantime, bye-bye and take care.